Hello, everybody, and welcome to Working Well Workshops, Sampling, Testing, and Treating Water from Your Well. This virtual workshop is designed to help Albertans deepen the understanding of their wells. The water we rely on for our homes, businesses, recreation, and livelihoods comes from the lands within Treaty 4, 6, 7, 8, and 10, as well as the Métis regions within Alberta. Water connects us all. It's a shared responsibility to protect and preserve this vital resource so that future generations can enjoy abundant, clean water. Tonight's workshop will run until 8 p.m. and we will cover the following topics: taking water samples and water treatment options. As some of you might have already noticed, your camera and mic have been disabled. If you wish to participate, you can use the React button found along the top of your screen. Or if you wish to submit a specific question, you can use the Q&A function, which is also along the top of your screen. When you click on the Q&A, simply type in your question into the text box and click Ask. These questions are being monitored by our support team on the call, and we'll be organizing the questions based on relevance, and the most relevant questions will be addressed during the Q&A sections as a group. If you happen to see a question posted that you also would like to be answered, you can use the arrow to upvote the question. This lets us know that there are many people that have the same question. Our session this evening will be recorded and posted online later this week. So please share this with your neighbors if they were unable to attend tonight's workshop. We also like to highlight our webpage as it has many other resources available beyond what we'll cover in our session tonight. We'll be referencing fact sheets and other resources through the presentation. The links for these resources will be shared through the Q&A taskbar, which I used just now. And we'll also be sending a follow-up email, which will include the links referenced in this presentation. So we'd like to encourage you to check out the resource library online. And you can search for topics based on categories and even types of resources. For example, if you're looking for a video but don't know the name of it, you can sort our resources using the pull down option under type of resources and select video to help narrow down the selection and help find what you are looking for. On this call tonight, we have myself, Erin Ritchie, as the facilitator. We have Hannah Lucas supporting the Q&A. Our presenter tonight is Tony Thepsuthan with Alberta Health Services, And we have additional subject matter experts on the calls, including Melissa Overlegner and Jennifer McPherson to help with questions, and including Matt McAllister with My Water Drilling and Pump Services. If you attended a workshop in the past, you'll know that the presentation used to be one long section. We've now divided up into 3 shorter sessions, so participants can choose to attend all 3 or only participate in the workshop that is most applicable to them. Please note that today we'll be focusing sampling, testing, and treating water, and we'll be prioritizing these questions on those topics. But we do encourage you to look on our website and watch the recordings of the previous sessions. Another feature of our team webinar tonight are polls. So we're going to use one right now. A question will appear in front of your screen. And we want to learn a little bit about yourself. So we want to know if you are a well owner or person responsible for managing and maintaining a water well, if you're just interested in learning more about water wells, if you are a professional looking to learn more, or if you're a student. And we do have a secondary question of, have you attended a workshop before? If yes, you have attended a virtual workshop, you've attended an in-person workshop, or no, you have not attended a workshop before. So we're going to take a moment to complete that poll. That would be wonderful. Looks like most of you are well owners or someone who is responsible for a well. And many of you have attended a virtual workshop before, so hopefully you attended ones prior. And we do have a few people who are new to the presentation and a handful that have been just to the in-person. Wonderful. Lovely. Well, thank you for taking that moment to complete that poll. And without further ado, I will pass along the next part of the presentation to our main presenter, Tony.
Quick sound check, you can hear me?
Yes, all good, Tony.
Awesome. All right. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. Quick intro on myself. My name is Tony Tepsavan. I'm a public health inspector. I work here in Edmonton Zone out of the Spruce Grove office, Stanwell Washington building. My role there is I'm the drinking water specialist for the zone. So that means I'm involved with water quality issues across the zone, whether it's public or private, municipal, non-municipal, or whatever happens to come up that day in terms of drinking water quality. I'm likely getting a call at some point on it. So it's a bit about myself. I've been with AHS since 2022. Before that, I worked with the Department of Indigenous Services at Health Canada, or Indigenous Services Canada as it's called now, in a similar capacity, working on water quality issues there. And I was a part of the Drinking Water Advisory working group for the region. All right. So who is this workshop for? I think we've covered this. Most of the folks here are well owners looking to learn more about their wells and how to maintain their wells. This may include acreage owners, recreational property owners, farmers, ranchers, persons looking to purchase a property, perhaps with a well on it, people working in real estate, or for anyone who has a water well and wants to learn more about its maintenance and upkeep. So your water well is one of the most important assets to you on your property. Water quality and water quantity is really important when it comes to groundwater. You are ultimately responsible for looking after any wells that are on your property. The key to ensuring your groundwater is safe is to understand how your well works, how to maintain it, to make sure it can provide water for many, many years to come. And to protect that supply, it's a shared resource across the province. Many Albertans rely on groundwater, and certainly maintenance can save on costly repairs as well. So I'm going to spend the first bit of the presentation talking about taking water samples and a bit about the services provided through Alberta Health Services when it comes to water testing. So things we're going to cover off: why you should test your groundwater, what you should be sampling for, how often to sample, when you might want to sample, where to take your samples once you have them, a little bit on interpreting test results when they come into you from us. And then there's a section that talks a bit about water treatment options when it comes to dealing with water quality issues with your groundwater, whether they're related to health concerns or aesthetic concerns. Just going to go over some basic and general treatment systems on groundwater, which are pretty common across the industry. All right, so why are we testing our water? Here are some reasons. We want to establish a baseline, essentially characterizing your groundwater and knowing what's there. Quality can change over time. It can change with season, as well as precipitation, groundwater movement, that sort of thing. We test our water to ensure that it's safe, especially if it's a well that's used for drinking or for household purposes. Evidence of contamination is not always observable to our senses. So just because a well has become contaminated, it may not look, smell, or taste any different. We want to test our water to identify parameters of concern that could be resolved through treatment. And lastly, if we want to verify a shock chlorination treatment was effective. So we can test the bacteria to determine whether coliforms or E. coli are present to tell us whether that shock treatment was effective or not. So the two testing services provided through AHS are for routine chemical and trace metals. This jar here to the left, it's the bottle used to measure and determine things like minerals, pH, hardness, manganese, lead, arsenic. So some parameters are aesthetic, some are health-based. And then the bottle to the right here, this is the bacteriological or BACT bottle. We're looking for indicator organisms that indicate contamination from either an environmental source, that's the total coliforms, or from a mammalian fecal source, which is the E. coli. Just a few stats here to share with you from sampling conducted between 2017 and 2020. So it's a few years old now, but still relevant for discussion. When it comes to bacteriological testing, around 24,000 samples were submitted during this time, and 21% had a general indicator for total coliform exceedances. So that's important to know. That suggests that the water quality may be compromised from environmental sources, from the surface, requires some follow-up from the well owner. 9% of those came back with fecal coliform or E. coli. That's a more high risk or priority result that indicates that there's been recent fecal contamination of an animal source. The water should not be consumed without treatment or boiling when we have a situation with E. coli present. With the routine chemicals, during this time period, we had just over 9,100 samples submitted from wells. And there, again, 21% came back with at least one MAC, or maximum allowable concentration exceedance. These are health-based exceedances, such as manganese, nitrate or nitrite, or arsenic. So the MACs, as we call them, they don't necessarily mean that the water is unsafe if you drink it, but the chronic exposure to that parameter could become problematic and cause health issues. So it's important to know what's in the water and how you're using the water, whether you're drinking it, and whether the treatment in place is adequate for that particular parameter. All right, so when to test. Some guidance here on when to test for BAC-T during drought, during flooding or heavy rains, certainly. That might be examples of where you want to just test the BAC-T only. Situations or scenarios where you want to test both the BAC-T and the routine chemical are examples here. So for a new well, you should test both BAC-T and chemical. If there's been a sudden change in taste, odor, or color, certainly that indicates that something's happening with the groundwater or your well in particular. If you've got a newborn in the house, if you've moved into a new house and it's on a groundwater supply, you haven't tested it, that's a good time to bring in some samples. If there's been either confirmed or suspected illness, specifically gastroenteritis or lower gastroenteritis symptoms, diarrhea, cramps, that sort of thing, and water is either implicated or can't be ruled out, it's always a good idea to test your water. And then lastly, if there's been any changes to the system, whether you're changing out components like pressure tanks or pumps or something like that, they may have introduced contamination. It's always a good idea to do a test to make sure that no contamination was introduced during that work. Some guidance here on sampling frequency. So we're talking groundwater here, so you can kind of ignore that first line around surface water sources, but for surface water, the recommendation is quarterly for BAC-T and every 3 years for chemical. Same applies for shallow wells or deeper wells that have been undergoing contamination issues. Sampling more frequently is recommended there, so quarterly. The chemical can be done every 3 years through AHS. That's kind of the interval that's allowable. If there is sufficient rationale for sampling in addition to once every 3 years, that can be discussed with a public health inspector, and if it's deemed reasonable to submit greater than that interval, then it may be approved for testing. Deeper wells are generally going to be more protected from surface contamination. So provided that testing has indicated satisfactory results, the guidance there is going to be semi-annually or twice per year, and again every 3 years for routine chemical. Shallow wells are generally any wells that are under 50 feet. So the more shallow a well is, the more susceptible or vulnerable it is to surface water contamination. You may also see the term GUDI. It's an acronym. GUDI stands for groundwater under direct influence of surface water. These are groundwater supplies that are easily influenced by surface water and consequently contamination that comes to surface water. So they may require additional monitoring and or treatment to be considered safe. All right. When you want to submit a water sample, it's important to know that the services through AHS are for testing water that's intended for human consumption or domestic water use. So in some cases, if you're trying to submit samples for other reasons, they may not be accepted. So some examples are for agricultural purposes, for mortgage approvals or property transactions, for determining effectiveness of water treatment, specifically for the chemical test. So the lab will not test post-treated water. You'll need to go through a private lab for that service. We don't do any testing for dissolved gases, and samples will often be rejected if the paperwork is not filled out properly. It can be as simple as getting the date wrong, and the lab will reject the sample. So it's important to follow the instructions on the requisition form that comes with the bottle to make sure that you're filling out the form properly and completely. Yeah, so you don't want to waste your efforts with taking the sample, bringing it into the office, and then getting a call from us saying it wasn't tested. So again, just doing your best to fill out that form as much as possible. Important as well to only use lab-approved specific sampling containers that were shown in an earlier slide. I've been in my office and folks have brought in their water in old pop bottles rather. One fellow brought in his whole Brita filter jug to test. So it's important to make sure that we're using the approved bottles for testing. If you are submitting, it would make it to the lab because the admins at our office simply wouldn't ship that sample bottle to the lab if it's not the approved container. Again, complete the requisition form and attach the labels that come with them. Yeah, the process is explained pretty well on the information sheet that comes with the requisition form. So just follow those instructions. When it comes to the BACT test, we want to sample off of the kitchen tap in most cases from the cold water for the most representative sample. And if you're testing for trace metals and the chemical profile, you'll want to sample before any treatment if the treatment is present. If not, then obviously from a kitchen tap is the same as a different outlet that's maybe the pressure tank or a different raw water outlet. There's no treatment, so it can be taken from there. But if you can bypass treatment, that's another option as well. But generally, it's going to be either the pressure tank or somewhere in your mechanical room prior to any treatment that might be present. Importance of proper sampling locations. So taking a sample from a contaminated faucet may not reflect the actual well water quality. So sometimes this happens. Folks will take samples from outside faucets, garden hoses, faucets with spray wands or aerators. These sampling points are easily contaminated with bacteria, which may be picked up by the lab testing. So in that case, it may be considered a false positive where we found something, but it's not related to the actual groundwater itself. So should avoid those sampling outlets. Also want to avoid rarely used faucets where metals or biofilms can accumulate, which can result in a chemical exceedance. We have seen this in lines that have not been used or flushed in a long time. We get people to sample off of it and we come back with a lead result or a copper result, something like that. If that's the only sampling point you can take from, then by all means we have to work with what we have, but maybe thoroughly flushing that line may help get a more representative sample. This slide just makes reference to a couple of the resources, a fact sheet and a video that you can find more information on. All right, so picking up bottles and dropping off samples, this can be done through our public health offices, depending on where you're situated in the province. You'll want to confirm the courier schedule, drop-off times, and days that those offices are shipping samples to provincial lab. Again, depending on where you are in the province, samples may be going to Calgary or to Edmonton labs. If you're driving a distance, you want to keep the samples cool during transport. We are looking, especially for back teas, we're looking to measure biological activity. So temperature can have an effect on their activity, especially if it's really, really warm outside and you're driving a distance. There's a chance that things could grow, but as a best practice, we want to keep our samples cool during transport. And of course, they are also kept cool once they're shipped via the courier in coolers and with ice packs. You're going to want to collect the sample the same day that you bring it in. Again, there are some parameters around testing. We want to get the most representative sample. So ideally, it should be at the lab within 24 hours of the sample collection. The longer it takes to get from the time of sampling to analysis, the less reliable the results are going to be. If you go to informalberta.ca and you search for your specific location, it should tell you where you can pick up bottles and drop off sample bottles. So that's a good resource there. All right, so you've submitted your sample. What happens next? With most initial sample results, it's going to come back with presence or absence, as denoted by these words here in orange. When we have a positive result, so that's a failure, that tells us that there is the presence of either total coliforms or E. coli. Failed results are generally reported a lot sooner. They're going to be reported within 3 to 4 days of submitting the sample. Usually it's within a day and a half or 2 days. Results are going to be provided by phone, and then once we've had connected with the client who sampled, we'll grab their information and we'll provide the results by email along with some information. If it's a pass or negative, that means it was free of total coliforms and E. coli. So in that case, you're not going to hear from a public health inspector or from AHS. It's the adage of no news is good news. We no longer send out results for satisfactory results to samplers. So that's a recent change made by Alberta Health Services. Now, if you are called by an inspector and you're told that your water needs to be retested or resampled, you'll need to have another bottle. And this time you'll, again, resubmit the sample. But one difference is you'll want to check off that it's a resample due to previous coliform contamination. And what the laboratory will do this time is quantify the result using a estimate of colony forming units per 100 milliliters. That tells us the magnitude of contamination and gives us guidance on what might be going on, whether it's a sampling error, whether it's a need for shock chlorination, whether it's something to do with a sampling outlet. So this picture to the right here doesn't show it too well, but that's what the lab reports look like. There's a lot of information, lots of numbers, letters, etc. But the important information is here in terms of telling us whether there's presence or absence of E. coli or total coliforms. So I mentioned earlier when we have E. coli, that's a higher risk result in the sense that the health risk is greater due to the presence of potential for E. coli, which can cause gastroenteritis and more serious symptoms if consumed and exposure occurs. When we send out back to results to samplers, when there's a failed result, we'll generally send this link. It's a link to a website, My Health Alberta, that explains what your test results mean for more information. Lots of this will be covered by the health inspector when they phone you, but it's also good to have an online resource that you can go back to if you have additional questions. Chemical trace metal interpretation. So you will get these results sent to you regardless of any exceedances. So that's one difference between the chemical and the bacteriological testing. the testing looks for health-based parameters. Again, we call these maximum allowable concentrations, or max. So things like fluoride, nitrate, arsenic, lead, manganese, and uranium are some common parameters that have a maximum allowable concentration tied to them. There's also aesthetic objectives that are reported. These are not health-based or linked to negative health outcomes, but they can affect the usability, palatability of the water. So anyone who's had excessive iron will know what a challenge it is to deal with. Anyone who has sulfur and iron reducing bacteria, similar issues there. If you have hard water as well, again, may not be unsafe from a health perspective, but it can be a challenge to use in terms of aesthetics and how it affects your fixtures and that sort of thing. Also reporting things on, as I mentioned, calcium hardness, pH, alkalinity. These are parameters that can affect the aesthetic quality, as mentioned, or it can affect treatment systems if they're present. These results are generally going to be reported by phone or email, usually within 2 weeks, but it can take up to 4 weeks depending on lab capacity and how busy they are. So the report looks like this, as you see on the right-hand part of the slide here. Lots of parameters. The first page is going to be routine chemical, and then the next page is going to be a trace metals analysis. And again, link will generally be sent to the homeowner or the client who sampled with information on what the results mean, along with some other materials and fact sheets depending on what was found by the lab. So if you have, for example, an arsenic exceedance, there may be an arsenic fact sheet that's sent out with your results so you can understand where it comes from, what it is, what it means, what the health concerns are, and that sort of thing. There are limitations to what we can test through our public labs. In some cases, you may need to send your sample to a private lab. So for example, if you're looking for nuisance bacteria or looking for biological activity reaction test for iron bacteria or sulfur reducing bacteria, you may need to go through a private lab. Not me, you will need to go through a private lab. And of course, they're going to charge you a fee for that service. My advice would be just to Google environmental water testing labs in Alberta, and it should show you private labs in your area that you can contact to get a testing done that you want to get tested. I recommend calling around to different labs. Different labs charge different prices, but you should make sure that they are accredited by the accrediting body so that the results are reliable and credible. So that's important to know as well. You're going to hear from a health inspector if you have failed results or if you have a exceedance on your chemical test. We'll review the test results with you, explain what they mean, what the health concerns are, possible sources, as well as solutions and mitigations, depending on the parameters of concern. And where appropriate, the inspector will provide guidance on retesting, resampling, and that sort of thing. So let's go back a second. So the extent of our interaction with samplers is going to be over the phone in most cases or through email. There may be situations where you need to contact a qualified professional, like a licensed water well driller. We have one who's with us tonight. They are certainly experts in their field when it comes to groundwater and well maintenance. Drilling wells, obviously, is their business. A licensed well driller may be able to assist with identifying sources of contamination, doing an assessment on the well. Maybe you've shocked the well, but you still have issues. It may require a deep cleaning or more maintenance. They also provide services like shock chlorination. Maybe you attempted it yourself and it wasn't effective, and you may need to hire that out to a professional service. In a lot of cases, well drilling companies also sell water treatment solutions depending on your water quality situation. So again, valuable resource to you if you know who your well driller is or who drilled your well according to your well drilling report. That's a good place to start when it comes to doing maintenance on your groundwater system. So we're going to pause there. I'll hand it back to Erin for a moment.
Yes, thanks, Tony. Appreciate that. All right, so we're going to take a moment to answer some of your questions. If you haven't submitted one yet, don't forget you can use that Q&A tab at the top of the screen to submit your questions. We will get to some of those, but we'll first start off with a bit of a poll just to give you a chance to type. So we do want to know, how often do you test your well water for bacterial analysis? Is it once every 6 months, once a year, only if you perceive a change in water quality, or you have never tested your water? And the follow-up for that would be, if you have never tested your water before, do you not test your water on a yearly basis? Why not? So is it not applicable because you do test your water? Is it because the sample drop-off times do not fit with your schedule? You just don't have the time? You don't have any concerns about your water? Or you weren't aware that you should be testing your water regularly? So take a moment to submit that poll and then also submit any questions that you have. We do have a few that came in through the presentation, which we'll get to. It was pretty even, almost even across the board for the results. But the majority right now is that they have never tested their water. So I'm glad that you're here at this workshop to learn about why you need to test your waters and how to do so. And then about why you haven't, most of it was because you weren't aware you should be testing your water regularly. Well, thank you for taking the moment to finish that poll for us. Well, we'll go to one of the questions that was asked. So Tony, this one is for you. We have a question is it possible to get previous test results from AHS if you were a new owner of a property?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it's possible that we can find a result. However, if you're taking over a property or moving on to a new property, it's recommended that you sample at that time anyway, so you have the most recent information. Again, water quality can change over time, so even if a test was located from a few years back, it may not reflect the current quality. So if you are again, using a new well, a new groundwater supply, it's good to test prior to use.
Perfect. All right, we have another question for you, Tony. We're curious about if there is free testing program available to small, non-regulated water co-ops.
Yeah, so the testing services for the public health labs are strictly for groundwater supplies and private supplies like cisterns. If you are a co-op, I believe you're overseen by environment. Is that right, or is environment involved at all? Maybe one of my colleagues can answer that question. Um, you have some capacity to test through the public labs if you're a co-op. There are some limitations on that, but maybe we can get someone to weigh in on that from environment.
Yeah, I would just say that they should probably contact environment to find out the size of the co-op, because that's what determines whether or not environment looks after them. It's based on the number of homes that the well actually provides to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and having dealt with water quality from co-ops, I do believe you're able to test through
Mm-hmm.
our
Mm-hmm.
AHS mandate,
Mm-hmm.
in addition to being in environment system.
Right.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony and Jennifer, also for providing some insight there. Another question we have is, again, for Tony. They want to know, how can they ensure their water is free from contaminants?
The only way to know it is to test, really. So when it comes to contaminants of concern for us in public health, it's going to be microbiological contaminants and chemical contaminants. So if a sample submitted from a groundwater supply is free of those hazards of concern, then we would deem that water potable and safe to drink.
Thank you, Tony. Wonderful. And if you do have questions that were not answered and you still want to know, there is that email at the bottom of the slide. But I think we do have capacity for one more question. Essentially, the question here, again, is for Tony. In the past, they were provided bacteria reporting of their sample and would like to keep those records going. Can I request the bacteria report since it's not automatically provided at this time?
Yeah, so I knew that might come up. It's actually quite an unpopular decision that they made, but it was made by someone well above my pay grade. That satisfactory results are just not going out to the samplers anymore. I believe it was related to administrative burden on the admins and just one last thing for them to do. So that's kind of where we're at. If if it's really, really important to you and you want a paper copy, the only thing I can recommend is sending it through a private lab. That way you have guaranteed paperwork that goes with your sample. At this time, we are not sending out satisfactory results, only for failed and unsatisfactory results.
Thank you, Tony. Great. Well, with that, we're going to move forward to the next section, which is also Tony's section about water treatment options.
All right. Those are great questions. Thanks for asking those. And hopefully I was able to answer them best I can anyway. I can't speak for the whole organization, but based on my experience anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from. All right, so we're going to jump into some discussion around water treatment options. I'm going to speak to these in generalities. Each system for a groundwater system is going to be different depending on the characteristics of that groundwater and then the issues that they have to deal with. All right, so first slide here, water treatment. Why are we treating water? Essentially, if we have some testing that's come back, either for chemical or BACT testing, that determines that treatment is necessary, whether it's for aesthetic concerns, dissolved solids, iron, taste, odor, or for health-based exceedances, such as exceedances of the MACs or the bacteriological quality, things like arsenic, fluoride, lead, manganese, and E. coli. There may be a need for continuous disinfection. And this is something that's up to the well owner, obviously. It may be recommended by the health inspector, but it's up to the well owner what they want to do with that water, whether it's install treatment or not use it for drinking. Yeah, depending on the characteristics of the well and the water quality results, the inspector may recommend continuous treatment to make sure that water's safe. Some scenarios where that might happen if there's repeated failed BACT analyses. So you've taken a sample, it's failed. We recommend retesting, comes back, it's failed. You shock the well, comes back, it fails. That really tells us that well supply, the groundwater supply, is vulnerable to contamination, and there's a pathway for contamination that's occurring from the surface or from animal sources. And in order for that water to be considered safe, then continuous disinfection would be recommended. Same goes for a shallow well. If you're dealing with a system that's GUDI, as mentioned, groundwater under direct influence, even if you test satisfactorily, there's no E. coli, no coliforms, it doesn't mean that the well is going to be safe all the time, right? So being a vulnerable shallow well, if there's a rainfall event or precipitation or runoff, contamination can easily occur with wells that are shallow and vulnerable to surface contamination. So in that instance, continuous inspection may be recommended by the public health inspector. Treatment system options come in two general categories: point of entry, or POE. This treats all the water before it's distributed into a building or home, often called whole house systems. This is intended to treat large volumes of water. So basically, all the water in a home gets treated. Point of use systems differ in the sense that they only treat a small quantity of water at a single point. Generally, it's going to be at the kitchen tap or one outlet. This is the final barrier to treatment prior to consumption, and these are generally going to be smaller units like you see here to the right. This is a typical reverse osmosis treatment system you find underneath the sink. In some cases, depending on your water quality, you may need to apply a multi-barrier approach. Just like the name sounds, you're applying more than one treatment system to address various water quality issues that may be present. So, for example, reverse osmosis does require some pre-treatment. You want that water to be as clean as possible before going through RO, so it doesn't foul up your membrane. So that maybe involving pre-treatment with cartridge filters or carbon filters before the RO. Things to consider when thinking about treatments. So certainly cost that comes with purchasing, installing, and maintaining that system. So there's equipment, the plumbing that goes with it, electrical demands, the ongoing operations, power, replacing filters as needed per manufacturer's recommendations, chemical supplies that come with that particular form of treatment, servicing, and maintenance. Health versus aesthetic concerns. So again, if you're talking to a health inspector with your water results, they'll be able to identify what the issues are and what possible solutions are in terms of treatments. You may need to test through a private lab depending on your parameter of concern. But when it comes to health-based exceedances, that's generally going to be through the public health inspector at AHS. User friendliness, so that's a factor as well. There may be alarms associated with systems, warnings, and timers to be aware of. So knowing how the system works and how to troubleshoot on a basic homeowner level is important to know. If it's too cumbersome, it may not be a good solution. The capacity of the water supply. So some devices require large volumes of water to work properly, things like softeners and iron filters. And there may be space requirements depending on the size of the system that you plan on installing. So having enough space in your basement to accommodate is important. Important too, just to mention standards and certification for treatment devices. Standards for drinking water treatment devices are, which are health-based, are developed by the NSF and the ANSI. These are essentially third-party entities that will test and accredit equipment when it comes to health-based water treatment systems. So it's important to make sure that that system has the NSF or the ANSI certification, especially if it's a health-based parameter like arsenic or something like that, or lead or fluoride. There's lots of products on the market, as you can imagine, making a variety of claims. So if they don't have the NSF certification, we can't guarantee that it does what it's purports to do. So keep that in mind for treatment. Treatment systems for health-related risks. So for point of entry, this may be in the form of continuous disinfection. Again, for shallow wells, surface water supplies, or deep wells that have a history of contamination or bacteriological failures, you may need to look at continuous disinfection for a whole house treatment system. For point of use, for exceedances of chemical parameters, so when a chemical test indicates an exceedance of a MAC, a maximum allowable concentration, you may want to consider treatment to address that particular MAC. Since most exposure is from drinking water, the focus is to reduce exposure at the main drinking water outlet, which is generally going to be the kitchen sink. So you may want to treat that that particular outlet or another one that's commonly used by the residents of the house. So continuous disinfection is just like it sounds. You're continuously treating the water to disinfect. It must be designed to remove or destroy viruses, bacteria, or protozoa. Those are the three most common hazards when it comes to biological hazards in water. These exist in the environment, and they come from human and animal sources as well. Installed at the point of entry to protect users from exposure to potentially contaminated water. So, for example, brushing teeth to main drinking water source. So, brushing teeth can be considered an exposure risk, depending on how much water that you may be inadvertently drinking during brushing teeth. So, basically, any activity that involves ingestion or possible ingestion, we should treat that water to make sure it's safe. Two common options for continuous treatment are going to be chlorination, along with absolute 1 micron filtration, or a certified NSF 55A ultraviolet light. I'll kind of highlight those in a little more detail here for information. So when we have a supply that's vulnerable to surface contamination, the recommendation is generally going to be filtration with 1 absolute micron filtration, followed by chlorination. Chlorine is very commonly used in drinking water treatment. It's an oxidizing agent that inactivates or destroys viruses and bacteria. It's fairly easy to use. It's fairly cheap to obtain, and effective against a wide spectrum of organisms. We want to get a minimum level of chlorine present so that we know that it's working. This can be measured with test kits and meters and that sort of thing. The reason why the 1 micron is needed is because chlorine is not effective against protozoan organisms. They require an extensive amount of contact time that's not really feasible with chlorine. So adding that 1 absolute micron filter up front of chlorination is intended to mitigate the risk from protozoans. And that needs to be maintained and monitored as well. So routine monitoring through test strips or home test kits for chlorine is generally going to be required for a chlorine system. And we want to maintain a residual to ensure that the system is working effectively from the time it gets treated to the time that the user drinks that water. So very similar to a municipal system in the sense that there's chlorine added and there's monitoring stages throughout the treatment process. This slide just gives a schematic of a typical flow diagram of a chlorine system. I'll just run through the components here. So you've got the well supply. You have nominal filters up front. This one's 20 microns, followed by 0.35 microns. And then we have the absolute 1 micron filter. So this essentially is an assurance that anything larger than 1 micron is filtered out. So that's the size of protozoa that we want to remove. Once it's filtered, it goes down the pipe here, and we're injecting chlorine into the system. The chlorine pump works on a metering system. So when water is being pumped through, the chlorine is being added. It sits inside the tank to achieve contact time. This is where the disinfection actually occurs in this chamber. When we've added the chlorine, we're giving the chlorine time to work and do its thing in terms of disinfection. And then treated water goes into the pressure tank, which responds to usage in the house. And that pressure tank goes up and down depending on usage and responds to the demands of the household. The other method mentioned is ultraviolet light. So UV, as it's often called, uses light at wavelengths that is necessary to kill disease-causing bacteria and viruses. It's quite effective at killing protozoa as well. So you wouldn't need a 1 micron in this situation because UV is doing all the work. However, you may want to install pre-treatment, or sometimes the manufacturer will recommend, or the installer recommends installing pre-treatment to remove sediment, iron hardness, or chlorine if it's present. So we want the water to be as clean as possible before it enters the UV chamber, because that can have an effect on the transmittance of the UV light, and of course its effectivity with its disinfection properties. So if you're looking at it at getting an NSF certified system, 55A is the classification for certification. It's the kind of industry standard when it comes to UV lights for public settings anyway. You'll want to keep the bulb clean. Over time, it will build up debris and gunk and will need to be cleaned and replaced once the transmittance diminishes to a point where it's not doing a good job disinfecting. So again, just a slide showing a schematic of what a UV light might look like. So you have the water coming in from the well here, pre-treatment depending on the manufacturer's recommendations or your installer's recommendations based on your water quality, pressure tank controlling the demands in the home. This is important here. This solenoid valve is tied to this UV controller. If the solenoid detects that the sensor is not producing enough ultraviolet light, it will actually shut off. And this prevents untreated water from going into the home. So this is basically a fail-safe. So if this reactor fails, no water is produced, so that no one is exposed to water that's not been treated. In cases of exceedances of a MAC or a maximum allowable concentration, reverse osmosis is generally going to be what we recommend. In terms of the process of reverse osmosis, you're forcing water through a extremely fine semi-permeable membrane that's permeable just to water molecules. And in the process, it filters out minerals or metals of concern. Generally, this is not going to be a large volume producing system. You can see in this slide here, there's a tank here. It's only going to store a couple gallons of treated water at a time. So it's usually just meant for water that's used for drinking or cooking. And the rest of the water that goes to showers and laundry and that sort of thing is not treated. So you're only focusing on the water that's being consumed. And again, pre-treatment is generally going to be required either by the installer or the manufacturer. This is needed just to protect the membrane. If water going in is dirty or full of sediment or dissolved solids and that sort of thing, it can reduce the runtime of your RO. It can cost you more money to maintain and replace fouling membranes. So the RO, again, generally is going to be installed underneath the sink. It can be tailored to fit into tight spaces or an unfinished part of the basement, and then it's plumbed up to the kitchen. And folks who use RO, find it improves the aesthetic quality of the water as well. The water just tastes better. Another option to address MAC exceedances is distillation. This can remove up to 90% of substances, including sodium, sulfate, nitrate, arsenic, and most metals, as well as organic compounds like pesticides, petroleum compounds, and of course microbes. Again, it's going to be treating a smaller volume of water. There are considerations like higher operating costs, like for power usage, can cause scaling, and it can take time to produce distilled water. And again, can also improve aesthetic quality. So this picture here, I'll kind of explain what's going on here. So you have the chamber that holds the raw water. It gets heated with this heating coil. There's steam produced, and then the steam is captured and cooled using this cooling coil, and the treated water is then stored here and dispensed. So you're essentially boiling the water, capturing the vapors, and drinking the cooled water vapors. Not that common in my experience these days, but still out there as an option for treatments. Okay, so in general, treatment for aesthetic concerns can come again in one of two ways, point of entry or POE or point of use. And these are some examples of point of entry systems: softeners, iron filters, sediment filters, activated carbon, aeration. I'll talk a bit about these in more detail. And then for aesthetic concerns, point of use devices are cartridge filters, RO, and distillation, which we just discussed. So the first one here we'll discuss for a point of entry is ion exchange, or more commonly a water softener. So essentially what we're trying to take out the undesirable ions. These are either cations or anions. Generally, it's going to be calcium or magnesium when you're dealing with a softener. And we're exchanging these ions for a different ion of a similar charge. So it's going to be, in most cases, sodium, because we're using salt in most water softening systems. So again, the principle is reducing hardness by exchanging hard mineral ions like calcium and magnesium for sodium or potassium. They require routine backwashing. Usually there's going to be a controller that takes care of that for you. You do need to maintain the softener by ensuring that you have enough salt in your brine tank to regenerate the resin and displace the calcium and magnesium that's collected over time. Softeners can also incidentally reduce other contaminants or ions as well, like iron, as well as manganese in some cases, provided the concentration is low enough. If it's really, really high, you're gonna want to look at an iron treatment system prior to the softener. It's important not to overload your septic system. If you've got one with backwash water, that can impact the biological activity inside the septic systems, or the operations in general of the private sewer system. So if you're able to discharge that to a part of the property that's not going to be affected by salty water. Another option is iron filtration. This can be in the form of a manganese green sand filter. So in situations where you have excessive levels of iron and manganese, this may be an option. So the green sand filter is the media that sits inside this blue tank here. The water needs to be oxidized in terms of making sure that we cause the contaminants of concern to precipitate out. So whether it's iron or manganese, an oxidant is applied. It may be potassium permanganate or chlorine, or it may be even oxygen. So once the contaminants are reacting with that oxidant, they can be filtered out with the green sand filter, and the filter needs to be backwashed similarly to a softener and regenerated with potassium permanganate. So this does require a minimum level of or volume of water of at least 5 gallons per minute. That's a consideration there. Another option is a sediment filter. So again, it looks very similar to a green sand filter. So this chamber or this tank here will have a media inside it, perhaps sand or anthracite. And it's basically just a filter to pass water through, and it takes out particles as small as 5.5 microns up to 25 microns. And again, as the filter bed gets used and contaminants are collected, we'll need to backwash regularly. If you're using a cartridge filter for sediment filtration, like you see here in blue, those will need to be changed out. So you usually have some guidance from the manufacturer on how often that needs to be done. Or if you notice there's reduced flow, it could mean that your filter needs to be changed, or make sure it's backwashing. Can be used as a second barrier in combination with air injection or chlorination to remove oxidized substances as well, and can be used as pre-treatment to remove fine particles prior to more expensive or sensitive treatment. So you may see, or you may be recommended to install sediment filtration up front of a UV or a reverse osmosis system, for example. Another example of point of entry is activated carbon filtration. So activated carbon is effective at reducing nuisance substances responsible for taste and odor. Folks may have one installed to remove chlorine from city water, for instance, or to address organic substances that may be present, which cause taste and odor in the groundwater supply. The process works by adsorbing impurities to the carbon media. It's important to do regular maintenance, regular cartridge filtration, changeovers and replacements, media regeneration, and backwashing as required. So again, the installer will likely provide guidance on that. It may be as simple as changing out a filter or ensuring that the controller is set to backwash on a periodic basis when flow is restricted due to the filter bed being clogged. Keep in mind this system activated carbon does not remove hardness, iron, fluoride, sodium, or other inorganic substances. So it's limited in terms of what it can and cannot remove. Next category are aeration and air injection. So you're basically just injecting in pressurized air into the water to oxidize and dissipate things like methane or hydrogen sulfide gas. If you apply oxygen to iron, it will precipitate out from ferrous to ferric iron. This is a diagram here that kind of just shows the flow again. So you have your well, your pitless adapter, the supply line coming in. And as it comes in, air is injected into this cistern where it's allowed to react, and then water is pumped into the rest of the house. If you're dealing with high iron and you're choosing to oxidize with air, you'll need to filter out that iron because it will precipitate out, and you don't want that going through your plumbing system. And then lastly, point of use systems when it comes to cartridge filters. So these filters are what's shown in the picture here. Generally, they're going to be for single water outlets, very commonly seen in modern fridges. If you're like me, you wait till the light comes on to change your filter, and then you wait another 6 months to actually change the filter, or there's no water coming through and you're forced to change it. So these things run around, $60, $70, depending on where you get them. They are intended to remove sediments, precipitated iron, residual chlorine. It makes the water taste a little bit better, especially if you're on city water. It takes out that residual chlorine taste. There are limitations as to what it can and can't remove. So hardness does not get taken out, iron, fluoride, sodium, or other inorganic substances. If you're looking at removing cryptosporidium, like the protozoa we described earlier, don't rely on a cartridge filter like this. You'll want to have a 1 micron absolute filter to ensure that that hazard is properly addressed. If this is a carbon filter, it will help reduce chlorine and other taste and odor concerns that may be present in the water. So again, disposable and relatively inexpensive. Really depends on how often you use it and how much water goes through the filter. But generally speaking, cartridges need to be replaced every 3 to 6 months. And if you have a smart fridge, it will generally tell you when it needs to be changed out. Carbon absorption effectiveness will decline over time. It can actually become a source of microbial growth as well if you don't change it. Microbes may be present in water, can live in that environment, can feed off the carbon. So that's something else to be aware of. So that's that last bullet there. The organics present may allow for microbes to grow rapidly, and that can affect the water quality as well. And this is my last slide. Just a few links here to share with you folks who are in attendance. The first one here is just to find your nearest public health center, AHS Health Center. For the time being, we are still with AHS, but environmental and public health is moving to GOA in the new year at some point. So just be aware of that. So maybe names and information might change at some point in the future. A link for the non-municipal guidelines. This document is what we use to apply to groundwater systems in public settings, which are not on municipal water systems, so well systems, etc. This basically helps us navigate water systems that serve the public. AHS fact sheets here, along with guidance on drinking water testing, which we discussed earlier, resources from AG, and if you're interested, the NSF website talks a bit about the certifications which are out there for water treatment. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation. Thanks for letting me ramble on about water. I've been talking for a while here, so happy to answer any questions or try and answer questions that might be out there.
Absolutely. Yes, we have some questions that people have submitted. Again, if you haven't had the chance yet, use that Q&A function there at the top. But we'll get started and we'll give you a little bit of a break, Tony. This one is going to be for Melissa. And they are curious if it's recommended to have well water tested if it's used to water cattle and horses.
So generally, groundwater is generally safe for livestock, but we would recommend you consult with your vet if you have any concerns, like if you're having some herd health issues, maybe your cows are miscarrying their calves, or some lots of scours or diarrhea or something like unexplained illness in your cattle. Make sure you discuss with your vet. There might be something that you want to look at. You might also notice your cows just not drinking the water. There could be a few reasons for that. But generally, it's okay. The things you would be looking for would be heavy metals. There are limits for that, recommended guidelines for that, and there are also sulfates is a big issue for cows. So you want to have a look at that. But to note that testing, you would have to go through a private lab to get done. That wouldn't be included with the testing program that Tony was talking about. And if you did get your results from a private lab and if you wanted some help interpreting those results for your livestock, you can give us a call at 310 Farm, and we'd be happy to help you interpret those results.
Thank you, Melissa. Perfect. The next question we have might be a bit of Tony and then a bit from Matt, our driller, as well. So we'll start with Tony and then we'll pass it off to Matt if there's anything to add. The question is, they had their well shocked 2 weeks ago because of a bad smell. It's a new well and they have a filter in place. The shocking got rid of the smell, but now the new smell is of iron plus discoloration, but just from hot water only. What could be causing this?
Good question. One culprit could be your hot water tank. There's a magnesium anode there that needs to be maintained and changed out on a semi-regular basis. It's meant to it's a sacrificial anode meant to extend the life of your hot water tank. So there could be iron or sulfur-reducing bacteria that are in your hot water tank that are growing inside there, and the anode needs to be replaced. That would be my first inclination. I'm not sure if our well driller has other thoughts.
I would agree, Tony. Some natural occurring minerals will react differently with hot water tank anodes. Might have to look at removing it or going with a different type of anode in the hot water tank.
Yeah, I actually just spoke to a client a little while ago about their odors in their hot water tank. They replaced the anode, but it kept coming back. And one solution that finally worked for them is a product, and I'm not intending to be a commercial for this product, but it did work for them, so I'll mention it. Coral Protect it's the brand name, and it's an electrified anode that you actually plug in that constantly supplies the hot water tank with ions. And that has kept the water from smelling. So that's one solution that worked for them. I believe that product is available online or through Amazon as well if you want to look for more information.
Thank you. Perfect. And the next question we have is for Matt, our driller on the call. The question is, Do well drillers get requests to install treatment systems? And what are the most common types of systems or water quality concerns that you see?
I would answer that with yes, they do. Now, not all water well drillers are in the world of water treatment. Some do, some don't. Um, the way that our biggest questions asked a lot of times are how far to take the water. Now, I mean, there's costs involved with all of these items, and a big one generally is just getting the water to a point where it's not creating staining or any issues with dishwashers or other appliances in the home. And then doing an RO for drinking water is a pretty standard practice. Now, again, that depends on what the raw water situation is. Some things do require further treatment just to get them there.
Thank you so much. All right, the next question we have is going to be for Tony. They want to know, what is the best treatment for arsenic contamination?
Great question. That's generally going to be, I mean, if you're looking at using that water for drinking, reverse osmosis is probably what we recommend in like 95% of cases. There is a certain species of arsenic that doesn't come out through RO, so that's a consideration that you have to make as well. You may want to test your treated water if you have arsenic in your raw water, and then after it's gone through reverse osmosis to verify that the reverse osmosis is effective in taking out all of the forms of arsenic. That way you can be assured that that water is going to be safe when you drink it.
Wonderful. I think we have time for one more question. This one's for you again, Tony. Do you recommend water treatment systems if the well water is good?
Good question. It's basically up to the well owner at that point. If it's aesthetically good and there's no health exceedances, then that water is considered potable and safe to drink. So it's a preference of the well owner. There's if there's no contaminants of concern, groundwater is going to be safe in the sense that it's it really depends on the depth of the well as well and the soil lithology. But if the water has been found to be safe from a bacteria and a chemical perspective, there's no requirement to install treatment. You may still install it just for a level of assurance or maybe to address aesthetic issues, but not required if the water is testing satisfactorily. And you do need to monitor it on an ongoing basis. So one-time testing wouldn't be enough. You want to make sure that that water, for as long as you're using it for drinking and for domestic purposes, is being monitored.
Perfect. Thank you, Tony. And if your question was not answered or you think of something you want to ask later, you can use that email listed at the bottom, and we'll get you in touch with the subject matter expert to answer your question. Perfect. Now, Tony, you're going to take us through the last few slides of our take-home messages.
Sure. I lost control. Let me take it back here. All right. So take-home messages from tonight's session. A few of this is from your previous sessions, but monitoring and keeping good records of your groundwater well, building history, keeping good records so you have your test results, your well drilling reports, pump test results, water level measurements, reconstruction details, decommissioning reports, repairs. Keep these in a binder somewhere that you can access. Log sheets are available via the link here at Working Well. Again, testing water regularly, as just mentioned. So having a groundwater supply is your responsibility to monitor the bacteria and chemical quality. We discussed the testing services available through Alberta Health Services, at least semi-annually for bacteria, more often depending on the water test results. And you may want to do additional testing when there's a newborn in the house, unexplained illnesses, or potentially flooding events, or if you notice that your wellhead has water ponding around it, you may want to test to make sure that that's not impacting the aquifer that you're pulling your water from. For chemical testing, again, the current interval is once every 3 years on untreated or raw water to monitor your water quality. Additional testing may be approved if there's been a sudden change in water quality. You can contact your local public health office to get bottles with instructions, as well as information on submission dates and times with the couriers that run from our rural offices. So being an educated consumer, knowing what parameters you want to remove before investing in a water treatment system. So I think it's just common sense approach to water treatment systems. So don't necessarily buy the first thing that you're sold by a salesperson, for instance. So you want to test your water, know what's there, and make sure that the system that you're considering is going to address the concern that's been identified through the testing. Use a reputable installer. Maybe you have a referral from a nearby neighbor or landowner. Maybe they have similar water quality challenges. If you're dealing with treatment equipment that is intended for health-based exceedances, you want to make sure it's NSF certified. Again, check the details of the warranties and guarantees that are provided by the manufacturer. And of course, do your homework, investigate different options for your particular situation, understanding the limitations of certain treatment systems. Cost for sure is a consideration. What volume of water you want to treat, how big the system is that's going into your home, that sort of thing. And then, of course, understanding maintenance. So purchasing and installing a system is one thing, but it does need to be maintained for the life of your groundwater supply. This might mean doing service and maintenance, changing filters, measuring chlorine if you have a chlorine system, changing your UV light bulb, making sure that flow is not restricted and that sort of thing. And when it comes to softeners and ion exchange, making sure that the controller is working, that backwashing is happening on a regular basis, and your media is being regenerated with salt, and making sure that that salt is replenished as it's used. And this slide here, just reference to previous sessions. The recordings are available online at the links provided here from sessions 1 and 2. Along with resources available to well owners for the Working Well website. Lots of templates there, resources, fact sheets, guidance on shock chlorination, and that water well is that last document. I actually use that document quite often in my line of work, just looking at providing well owners with information on maintenance, shock chlorination, and that sort of thing. And then a link for the Alberta Well Drillers Association to find a licensed well driller, licensed water well drilling contractor. If you have additional concerns with your groundwater supply or your well that requires more investigation or maintenance, that would be a good place to start. So I'll throw it back to you, Erin.
Thanks, Tony. Appreciate that. Lovely. We do have a little bit of time to answer any last minute questions anyone may have. But please, if you have the moment to put in your feedback into our survey about our workshop, I just popped it into the Q&A section. We will also be sending an email tomorrow morning with the resources that are referenced in this presentation, including the link to the workshop. And as a reminder, this session has been recorded and will be posted later this week on the Working Well homepage, so you can reference that and also look at the past presentations that we did earlier the last 2 weeks. Perfect. So we do have capacity for a few more questions. And this one's going to go to you, Tony. We have a question that came in, and they're wondering, does the government provide the vectorial test for free on a semi-annual basis.
Yes, that test is free.
Great. Sweet and simple. I love that. Great. All right. And we have another one here for you, Tony. They're wondering what are the options for improving well water taste, smell, and quality when there's already a softener and filter in place.
Oh, okay. You might want to consider. I mean, it depends on the nature of the taste and odor issues, but a carbon filter would be something I'd recommend. Um, Activated carbon will capture or absorb those molecules that are responsible for taste and odor. So that might be one way to go. Certain like filters made by Brita may be used as well. I believe those are carbon filters as well. So if you wanted to treat a small volume of water that you use for drinking, that might be an option.
Wonderful. Thank you. Lovely. Well, I think that kind of sums up our presentation for tonight. If you had a specific question that we weren't able to answer tonight, again, there is that email listed on the page in front of you. I will leave that page up for a few moments so you have an opportunity to write it down. But again, look for that email from us tomorrow morning for those links and attachments for completing the survey and where to find the recordings. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.